Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
I watched my husband marry my backstabbing best friend in church while he texted me, working late, and I smiled, replied with a casual, enjoy your night, honey, because tomorrow, well, let's just say revenge is sweeter than betrayal. If you think this story can't get any crazier, buckle up, it's only beginning. It started like any other day, or so I thought. My alarm buzzed at 7 in the morning, and I stretched out of bed, ready to face another day as Sarah Thompson's perfect wife. Life had been good to me up until that point. Jake and I had built what seemed like an unshakable foundation for our marriage. Mutual respect, trust, and love. We weren't perfect. We fought over little things, sure, but we always found a way back to each other. That's why, when Jake kissed me goodbye with his usual charm, whispering how much he loved me before heading off to a big meeting, I didn't think twice about it. He was always busy with work, always chasing deadlines, always juggling projects. It was just another Tuesday. I got dressed for work, choosing my favorite black pencil skirt and a crisp white blouse. As I applied mascara, I glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall. Another ordinary day ahead, meetings, emails, maybe grabbing lunch with Rachel if she wasn't too busy. Speaking of Rachel, my best friend since college, I hadn't seen her in weeks. She'd been acting distant lately, canceling plans last minute or making excuses about being swamped with her own job. I chalked it up to stress. After all, we were both adults with demanding lives now. But something about her recent behavior nagged at me, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The drive to the office felt routine, the same playlist looping through my car speakers. By mid-morning, I was buried in spreadsheets and conference calls, barely noticing the hours slip by. Then came the call that changed everything. My phone rang around 3 o'clock, pulling me out of a particularly tedious budget review. Glancing at the screen, I saw Rachel's name flashing. At first I hesitated. Wasn't she supposed to be working late? Still, curiosity got the better of me, and I answered with a cheerful, "Hey, Ratch, what's up?" Her voice trembled over the line, barely audible beneath layers of emotion. "Sarah, I need to talk to you." "Like right now?" I frowned, leaning back in my chair. "Whoa, slow down. Are you okay? You sound off." "I am not okay," she admitted, her words tumbling out faster than usual. "This can't wait. Can we meet somewhere after work? Please." Now I was genuinely worried. Rachel wasn't one for dramatics, not usually anyway. Sure, she could be emotional sometimes, but this sounded different. Desperate. Urgent. "Of course," I said quickly. "Where do you want to go?" She suggested our favorite cafe downtown, the cozy little spot where we used to spend hours gossiping during college. "Be there at 5, she added, her tone clipped and tense. Before I could respond, she hung up. For the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't focus. Every time I tried to dive back into work, my mind wandered to Rachel's cryptic message. What could possibly have her so upset? Had something happened to her family? Was she sick? Or no? Surely not. I shook off the darker thoughts creeping into my head. Whatever it was, I'd find out soon enough. When I arrived at the cafe, Rachel was already waiting outside, pacing nervously under the awning. Her usually vibrant demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Today, she looked pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. My stomach twisted into knots as I approached her. "Ratch," I called softly, unsure whether to hug her or keep my distance. She turned toward me, her expression breaking my heart. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "For what to happen?" I asked, confusion clouding my features. "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, she grabbed my arm and pulled me inside the cafe. Once seated at a quiet corner table, she fidgeted nervously with her hands, avoiding eye contact. "I don't know how to say this," she began, her voice trembling. "But I owe it to you to tell you the truth." My pulse quickened. This wasn't just some random drama. Something serious was happening here. "Just spit it out, Ratch. You're scaring me." And then she did. In a rush of words, she confessed everything. How she and Jake had been seeing each other behind my back for months. How they'd met secretly at coffee shops, hotels, even during those business trips Jake claimed to take. How they'd fallen in love, despite knowing full well what their actions would cost me. By the time she finished, tears streamed freely down her face, soaking the napkin she clutched in her lap. Time froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My mind refused to process the weight of her confession. Jake and Rachel? Together? Behind my back? It was impossible. Unthinkable. Betrayal burned hot in my chest, followed swiftly by disbelief. Surely, she was mistaken. Surely, this was some cruel misunderstanding. You're lying, I managed finally, my voice shaking. There's no way Jake would ever do that to me. You're confused, wretch. Maybe you misinterpreted something. Rachel shook her head vehemently, fresh tears spilling over. No, Sarah. I wish I were wrong. I wish none of this were real. But it is, and I'm so sorry. The world tilted beneath me. My vision blurred, and my hands trembled as I reached for my water glass. How long? I croaked, needing to hear the specifics, no matter how painful. Months, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Since last summer. That meant every single work trip, every late-night meeting, every excuse he'd given me while sneaking off to see her. Anger surged through me, sharp and blinding. How dare they? How dare they betray me like this? Yet, even as rage bubbled to the surface, I forced myself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help me now. Neither would hysteria. If I wanted answers and revenge, I needed clarity. Taking a deep breath, I locked eyes with Rachel. Tell me everything, I demanded, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Leave nothing out. So she did. Over the next hour, she spilled every detail. Their first encounter, their clandestine meetings, the lies they'd woven to cover their tracks. Each revelation cut deeper than the last, leaving me raw and exposed. When she finally fell silent, exhausted, I sat there in stunned silence, processing the wreckage of my life. By the time I left the cafe, night had fallen, casting shadows over the city streets. My car ride home was a blur, memories of Jake flashing through my mind like broken film reels. His smiles, his kisses, his promises, all tainted now by deceit. I parked in the driveway, staring blankly at the house we'd shared for years. Our home, or rather, his hideout. Inside, the house felt colder than usual, its familiar comforts hollowed out by betrayal. I poured myself a glass of wine, savoring the burn as it slid down my throat. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve, to feel the pain, the anger, the betrayal coursing through my veins. As I sat alone in the dark, one thought echoed in my mind. Tomorrow, I would make them pay. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow inside. The events of the previous day still weighed heavily on my mind, and every breath seemed to carry a tinge of betrayal. As I shuffled toward the kitchen to make coffee, something unusual caught my eye, an envelope tucked neatly under the front door. At first glance, it appeared ordinary, but as I picked it up, my heart sank. It wasn't addressed to me specifically, just a generic "to friends and family" scrawled in elegant cursive. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, dreading what might be inside. Inside was a wedding invitation bearing two names I never imagined seeing together, Rachel and Jake. The date was today. Today. My vision blurred for a moment as I read the details again, trying to convince myself that this had to be some sort of mistake. But no, there was black ink on white cardstock mocking me with its simplicity. They were getting married less than 24 hours after confessing their affair to me. Less than 24 hours after tearing apart everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and friendship. My initial reaction was disbelief. How could they possibly pull off such a thing without anyone noticing? Did they plan this all along, knowing full well that Rachel's confession would leave me too stunned to stop them? Or was this just another layer of cruelty, rubbing salt into the wound by making it so public, so final? Anger surged through me like wildfire, consuming any lingering traces of shock or sadness. This wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. For a brief moment, I considered ignoring the ceremony entirely. After all, why give them the satisfaction of seeing me there? But then I remembered something important. Revenge isn't about confrontation. It's about understanding your enemy. If I wanted to truly dismantle the twisted reality they'd created, I needed to see it firsthand. So I made a decision. I would attend the wedding, not to confront them publicly, but to observe, to gather information, and most importantly, to remind myself of exactly who these people were. I spent the next hour preparing carefully. Dressing became an act of defiance. Instead of opting for something bright or cheerful, I chose my darkest outfit, a black pencil skirt, a charcoal blazer, and simple heels. No jewelry, no makeup, just plain, unapologetic darkness. Each item I put on felt like armor, shielding me from the emotional storm brewing ahead. Before leaving, I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different. Harder, colder, more determined. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control returning. The church was located on the outskirts of town, nestled among rolling hills and tall oak trees. It was picturesque, the kind of place couples dreamed of exchanging vows. Yet, as I stepped inside, the beauty of the setting only heightened the absurdity of the situation. Rows of chairs filled with guests chatted animatedly, completely unaware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes. Somewhere among those faces sat Rachel and Jake's closest friends, family members, even colleagues from work. None of them knew the truth, not yet anyway. I slipped into a seat near the back, careful to remain inconspicuous. From here, I could watch everything unfold without drawing attention to myself. As the organ music began to play, the doors at the rear of the church swung open, and Rachel appeared, walking slowly down the aisle. She looked stunning, her white gown flowing gracefully around her as she smiled at the congregation. Every step she took felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. Beside her stood Jake, dressed in a sharp suit, his face glowing with pride. He didn't glance in my direction once, too busy basking in the spotlight of his new life. As the ceremony progressed, each word exchanged between them stung worse than the last. Their vows were filled with promises of love, loyalty, and commitment. All lies, every single one. I forced myself to stay calm, focusing instead on observing their body language, their interactions with the crowd, anything that might reveal cracks in their facade. When the priest finally declared them husband and wife, applause erupted throughout the church. Rachel laughed softly, leaning into Jake as he kissed her forehead. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect couple. To me, they looked like thieves. It wasn't until the reception that things really started to unravel. Guests mingled freely, sipping champagne and congratulating the newlyweds. I stayed in the shadows, watching silently as Rachel and Jake moved through the crowd, soaking up admiration. Then came the speeches, the best man's toast, the maid of honor's heartfelt words, even a few jokes from close friends. Through it all, I remained invisible, unnoticed. That is, until Jake's phone buzzed loudly on the table beside him. He glanced at the screen, confusion flickering across his face. His brow furrowed briefly before smoothing out again, replaced by a practiced smile. I smirked inwardly, knowing exactly what he'd just read. Earlier, while sitting alone in my car outside the church, I typed out a simple message to him. "Enjoy your night, honey." The words were innocent enough, almost playful, but their meaning carried a weight neither of us could ignore. Jake scanned the room nervously, searching for me, but I stayed hidden. Let him wonder. Let him stew in uncertainty. Revenge doesn't come easy. It requires patience. And patience, I realized, was something I had plenty of now. As the evening wore on, I noticed subtle changes in both Rachel and Jake's behavior. Rachel grew increasingly fidgety, glancing toward the entrance every few minutes. Jake, meanwhile, kept checking his phone, clearly unsettled by whatever messages he was receiving. Neither of them seemed able to fully enjoy the celebration anymore. By the time the cake-cutting ceremony rolled around, they were practically vibrating with tension. Watching them squirm brought a strange sense of satisfaction, though it did little to dull the ache in my chest. When the reception finally ended, I lingered long enough to see them drive away in a limousine, waving cheerfully to the remaining guests. Once they were gone, I allowed myself a small smile. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities. Tomorrow I'll start planning my next move. Because revenge, as sweet as it tastes, is only the beginning. The drive home after the wedding felt interminable. The silence in my car was oppressive, punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of tires on pavement and the occasional flicker of headlights from passing vehicles. My mind raced with thoughts of the day's events, replaying every detail like a broken record. Rachel's radiant smile, Jake's practiced charm, the way they exchanged vows filled with lies. It all played out in vivid technicolor behind my eyelids. But beneath the anger and betrayal, there was something else gnawing at me, a nagging suspicion that their betrayal went deeper than mere infidelity. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked eerily quiet. For years, this had been our sanctuary, a place where we shared laughter, arguments, and countless memories. Now, it felt like a stranger's home, cold and impersonal. I stepped inside, flipping on lights as I moved through familiar rooms. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of coffee, letting the bitter aroma ground me in reality. Sitting at the table, I stared blankly at the steaming mug, my mind consumed by questions. How far did their deception go? What else had they hidden from me? It wasn't until later that night, while tidying up the living room, that I noticed something unusual. On Jake's desk, tucked neatly between piles of papers and folders, sat a manila envelope labeled Important Documents. The label itself wasn't suspicious. Jake often kept important files organized, but something about its placement caught my attention. It seemed too deliberate, almost as if it were waiting for me to find it. Curiosity overwhelmed caution, and before I could second-guess myself, I opened it. Inside were documents I never expected to see. Bank statements, property deeds, tax records, all bearing names I recognized but didn't understand. At first glance, the numbers appeared mundane, just rows of figures and dates. But as I delved deeper, patterns began to emerge. Large sums of money transferred between accounts I'd never heard of. Property deeds signed under both Jake and Rachel's names. Contracts for businesses registered in her name alone. Each discovery felt like another punch to the gut, confirming my worst fears. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They'd stolen from me financially too. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, piecing together the puzzle. Over the past year, Jake had systematically siphoned funds from our joint account, funneling them into offshore accounts and real estate investments tied to Rachel. He'd even set up several small businesses in her name, ensuring she reaped the benefits while shielding himself from scrutiny. All those expensive gifts she flaunted during our friendship, luxury handbags, designer clothes, vacations abroad, suddenly made sense now. Every penny came directly from the life we'd built together, the trust I'd placed in him. Anger surged through me like wildfire, consuming every ounce of restraint I'd managed to maintain so far. How dare he? How dare they? Not only had they destroyed my emotional foundation, but they'd robbed me blind, leaving me with nothing but shattered illusions. For a moment, I considered confronting them immediately, storming into their newlywed bliss and tearing apart their carefully constructed facade. But then I remembered something crucial. Revenge isn't about impulsiveness. It's about precision. If I wanted to dismantle their empire, I needed more than rage. I needed evidence. Determined to uncover the full extent of their scheme, I spent the next few days digging deeper. Armed with the initial documents, I began tracing transactions, cross-referencing bank statements, and mapping out connections between accounts. Hours turned into days as I pored over spreadsheets, legal filings, and corporate records. By the end of the week, I had enough material to bury them in lawsuits for decades. Every new discovery fueled my determination further, reinforcing my belief that justice would prevail. But exposing them wouldn't be enough. I wanted them to feel the same pain they inflicted on me. So, I added a personal touch to my strategy. Using social media, I crafted a series of anonymous posts hinting at their scandalous marriage. Anonymous tips poured in from friends and family members shocked by the revelation. Word spread fast, tarnishing their carefully constructed image. Public pressure mounted against them, forcing them to issue vague statements denying wrongdoing. However, their shaky defense only raised more suspicion. During this time, I also reached out to professionals who could help legitimize my findings. A friend from college introduced me to Emma, an attorney specializing in corporate fraud. After hearing my story, she agreed to assist me, intrigued by the complexity of the case. Together, we devised a plan to gather evidence legally and systematically dismantle Jake and Rachel's empire. Her expertise proved invaluable, helping me navigate the labyrinthine world of finance and law. With her guidance, I documented everything meticulously, preparing for the moment when I'd expose their web of lies. Meanwhile, life went on as usual for them anyway. They acted blissfully unaware of the storm brewing above their heads. To the outside world, they were the happy newlyweds starting fresh, sharing photos of their honeymoon and posting updates about their new ventures. Their Instagram feeds overflowed with pictures of sunsets, champagne glasses clinking, and smiles that looked forced even to me. Watching them pretend everything was fine brought a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction because I knew their charade wouldn't last forever. Sorrow because, despite everything, they once meant something significant to me. As weeks passed, cracks began to appear in their perfect facade. Reports surfaced linking Rachel to questionable financial dealings, raising eyebrows among her colleagues and acquaintances. Friends who once fawned over her success now distanced themselves, wary of being associated with someone under investigation. Jake, meanwhile, struggled to maintain his composure, alternating between arrogance and paranoia depending on the situation. During public appearances, he maintained his charming exterior, laughing off accusations with dismissive remarks. Privately, however, he grew increasingly agitated, snapping at staff and canceling meetings without explanation. Despite their outward confidence, I sensed fear lurking beneath the surface. Late one evening, while scrolling through comments left on my anonymous posts, I stumbled upon a thread discussing Rachel's lavish lifestyle. Someone mentioned spotting her shopping spree in Paris just weeks after her supposed honeymoon. This sparked outrage among followers, questioning how she afforded such extravagance given her modest salary. Sensing opportunity, I encouraged the conversation, feeding subtle hints to keep the fire burning. Within days, local news outlets picked up the story, digging deeper into her sudden wealth. Reporters discovered discrepancies in her tax filings and linked them directly to Jake's illegal activities. Public pressure intensified, forcing them onto the defensive. Their attempts to salvage their reputation fell flat, overshadowed by mounting evidence against them. Yet, even as their world crumbled around them, they refused to acknowledge their mistakes. Instead, they blamed others, corrupt officials, jealous rivals, overzealous journalists. Watching them twist reality to suit their narrative provided grim amusement, reinforcing my belief that karma works in mysterious ways. Through it all, I remained calm, biding my time. Revenge doesn't come easy. It requires patience. And patience, I realized, was something I had plenty of now. While they scrambled to protect their crumbling empire, I prepared for the final act of my plan. Because I thought tomorrow will bring new opportunities. Tomorrow, I'll ensure they pay for every lie, every betrayal, every stolen moment of happiness. And when it's done, I'll walk away, not just victorious, but free. The morning after my discovery, I sat in the quiet solitude of my kitchen, staring at the stack of documents spread across the table. The evidence was undeniable. Jake and Rachel had systematically dismantled our life together, siphoning away not just my trust, but also my financial security. My hands shook as I flipped through pages filled with numbers and signatures, each one a reminder of their betrayal. But anger alone wouldn't bring me justice. I needed help, someone who could guide me through the legal labyrinth and ensure that every piece of evidence counted. That's when Emma came to mind. We hadn't spoken in years, not since she left her corporate job to pursue a career in law, but I remembered her sharp intellect and relentless determination. If anyone could navigate this mess, it was her. After hesitating for only a moment, I picked up my phone and dialed her number. To my relief, she answered almost immediately, her voice warm and familiar despite the passage of time. "Emma," I began, trying to keep my tone steady. "It's Sarah. Remember me?" There was a brief pause before she replied, "Of course. How have you been?" "It's been ages." Her genuine enthusiasm gave me the courage to continue. Over the next hour, I spilled everything: the betrayal, the stolen finances, and my growing desire for justice. At first, I worried she might dismiss my concerns or worse, judge me for trusting Jake so blindly. Instead, she listened intently, asking pointed questions about the documents I'd uncovered and the timeline of events. By the end of the call, she agreed to meet me in person, intrigued by the complexity of the case. Our meeting took place at a cozy cafe downtown, the same spot where I confronted Rachel weeks earlier. As Emma walked in, I couldn't help but notice how much she'd changed since we last saw each other. Her once tidy office attire had given way to casual yet professional outfits, and there was a newfound confidence in her demeanor. She greeted me with a warm hug, then settled into the chair opposite mine, leaning forward with an expression of intense curiosity. "So," she started, her eyes scanning my face, "you've got quite the story here. Tell me everything again, but this time, let's focus on specifics. What exactly do you have proof of?" I handed her the folder containing the documents I'd gathered, explaining each item in detail. From bank statements showing suspicious transfers to property deeds signed under both Jake and Rachel's names, nothing escaped her scrutiny. As she read through the papers, her brow furrowed deeper, a sign that even she, a seasoned attorney, was shocked by the depth of their deception. "This is impressive work," she said finally, looking up at me with admiration. "You've already done more than most people would in your position. But if we're going to take them down, we need to be thorough. Every detail matters." With that, we began devising a plan. Emma outlined the steps necessary to gather additional evidence legally, emphasizing the importance of documenting every transaction and interaction. She also suggested bringing in reinforcements, specifically a private investigator with expertise in financial fraud. Within days, she introduced me to Mark, a wiry man in his late 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. Mark proved to be a game changer. Using his extensive network and advanced tools, he traced every transaction Jake made during his affair with Rachel. Hidden offshore accounts, forged signatures on legal papers, secret business ventures. All of it came to light under his watchful eye. Each discovery fueled my determination further, reinforcing my belief that no stone should be left unturned. Together, we built airtight cases against both Jake and Rachel, ensuring that every piece of evidence stood up in court. But exposing them legally wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the same pain they inflicted on me, to experience the humiliation and isolation they'd caused me. So, I added a personal touch to my strategy. Using social media, I crafted a series of anonymous posts hinting at their scandalous marriage. At first, the responses were mixed. Some dismissed the allegations as gossip, while others demanded proof. But as more details emerged, public opinion shifted dramatically. Anonymous tips poured in from friends and family members shocked by the revelation, many of whom had suspected something was amiss but lacked concrete evidence. Word spread fast, tarnishing their carefully constructed image. Friends who once fawned over Rachel's success now distanced themselves, wary of being associated with someone under investigation. Colleagues questioned Jake's integrity, whispering behind closed doors about his sudden rise in wealth. Even acquaintances from our shared past chimed in, sharing stories of odd behavior or questionable decisions. The tide had turned, and they were drowning in its wake. As weeks turned into months, the pressure mounted on Jake and Rachel. Public scrutiny forced them onto the defensive, issuing vague denials and half-hearted apologies that did little to quell the outrage. Yet, even as their world crumbled around them, they refused to admit fault. Instead, they doubled down on their lies, blaming corrupt officials, jealous rivals, and overzealous journalists for spreading falsehoods. Watching them twist reality to suit their narrative provided grim amusement, reinforcing my belief that karma works in mysterious ways. Through it all, I remained calm, biding my time. Revenge doesn't come easy. It requires patience. And patience, I realized, was something I had plenty of now. While they scrambled to protect their crumbling empire, I prepared for the final act of my plan. Because I thought tomorrow will bring new opportunities. Tomorrow, I'll ensure they pay for every lie, every betrayal, every stolen moment of happiness. And when it's done, I'll walk away. Not just victorious, but free. In the meantime, alliances formed in unexpected places. Emma became not just my legal advisor, but a trusted confidant, offering support whenever doubt crept in. Mark, though initially reserved, grew fond of my tenacity, often sharing insights gained from years of investigating similar cases. Together, we formed a team united by a single goal: to dismantle the web of deceit spun by Jake and Rachel. And with each passing day, that goal felt closer to becoming a reality. One evening, as I sat in the dim glow of my living room scrolling through social media, a comment caught my eye. It was buried deep within a thread discussing Rachel's recent shopping spree in Paris, a trip she had proudly documented on Instagram with photos of designer handbags, couture dresses, and champagne toasts at exclusive boutiques. At first glance, it seemed like just another example of her flaunting wealth, something that had become increasingly common since her marriage to Jake. But one commenter pointed out something peculiar: the timing of this extravagant outing. They noted that Rachel had supposedly been on her honeymoon only weeks earlier, yet here she was jetting off to Europe for what appeared to be a second celebration. This observation sparked a flurry of responses from other users, many of whom expressed disbelief over how someone with Rachel's modest salary could afford such luxury. "Doesn't she work in marketing?" one user asked. "How does a mid-level employee afford Cartier watches and private jets?" Another chimed in, speculating about whether Jake might have funded the trip using company resources. Sensing an opportunity, I decided to fan the flames further. Under the guise of an anonymous account, I added subtle hints designed to keep the conversation alive: questions about offshore accounts, references to suspicious business dealings, and reminders of their rapid ascent into affluence. Each post drew more attention, turning the thread into a viral sensation overnight. By morning, local news outlets had picked up the story, intrigued by the allegations of financial impropriety. Reporters dug deeper into Rachel's tax filings, uncovering discrepancies that raised red flags. For instance, her declared income barely covered basic living expenses, let alone lavish vacations and high-end purchases. When cross-referenced with property records, these findings revealed multiple real estate investments registered under her name, all acquired within the past year. Suspicion quickly turned to scrutiny, prompting calls for transparency and accountability. The initial response from Jake and Rachel was predictable. Through carefully crafted statements issued via their PR team, they dismissed the accusations as baseless rumors spread by jealous detractors. "We're proud of our hard work and achievements," Rachel said in a video posted to Instagram, her smile strained but determined. "Our success is the result of years of dedication and smart investments." Jake echoed similar sentiments during a live interview with a regional news station, emphasizing his commitment to ethical business practices while downplaying any connection between his finances and Rachel's spending habits. However, their defensive tone only fueled public skepticism. Critics questioned why two individuals who claimed to have built their wealth independently were so reluctant to provide concrete evidence supporting their claims. As the investigation unfolded, cracks began to appear in their carefully constructed facade. Journalists uncovered connections between Jake's corporate ventures and several shell companies linked to offshore accounts. These entities funneled money into properties owned jointly by him and Rachel, effectively laundering funds while shielding them from taxation. Meanwhile, whistleblower tips emerged from former employees alleging systemic misuse of company resources, including unauthorized bonuses paid to select insiders and inflated expense reports submitted under false pretenses. Watching their world unravel before my eyes brought a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. On one hand, seeing justice served gave me a sense of closure. Finally, they were being held accountable for their actions. Yet, part of me couldn't help but feel regret. For the wasted years spent building trust, for the friendships lost, for the life we'd once shared. Still, I reminded myself that revenge isn't personal. It's about restoring balance. And if exposing their crimes meant ensuring no one else fell victim to their schemes, then so be it. While the media circus raged on, I prepared for the final phase of my plan. Armed with evidence gathered by Emma and Mark, I filed formal complaints against Jake for embezzlement and fraud. The documents detailed every transaction he'd made during his affair with Rachel, tracing the flow of money from our joint account to offshore havens and back again. Each page carried the weight of betrayal, a testament to the lengths he went to enrich himself at my expense. Submitting the paperwork felt surreal, like flipping a switch that would forever alter the course of our lives. In the days following the filing, legal proceedings moved swiftly. Investigators subpoenaed bank records, interviewed witnesses, and analyzed digital communications, all under the watchful eye of the court. Every revelation chipped away at Jake's credibility, painting him not as a successful entrepreneur, but as a master manipulator willing to sacrifice anyone to achieve his goals. Watching him squirm under the weight of accusations gave me immense satisfaction. His polished exterior cracked under pressure, revealing the desperation lurking beneath. During depositions, he stumbled over answers, contradicted himself repeatedly, and resorted to blaming others when cornered. Even Rachel distanced herself from him, realizing too late that their partnership hinged entirely on mutual benefit rather than loyalty. Yet, despite the progress made thus far, I knew this was merely the beginning of their undoing. Legal battles often stretch across months, sometimes years, dragging participants through cycles of hope and despair. What mattered most wasn't speed but precision, ensuring every accusation stuck, every piece of evidence held up in court. To achieve this, I worked closely with Emma, fine-tuning strategies and anticipating counterarguments. Together, we built an ironclad case capable of withstanding even the most aggressive defense tactics. Meanwhile, public opinion continued to turn against them. Social media platforms buzzed with outrage over their alleged misdeeds, fueling demands for greater transparency in corporate governance. Activists called for stricter regulations on executive compensation and clearer guidelines for conflict of interest disclosures. Though initially targeted solely at Jake and Rachel, the movement gained momentum, inspiring broader conversations about ethics and accountability in modern society. For the first time, I saw the potential for lasting change, not just for myself, but for countless others affected by similar betrayals. As the dust settled around their crumbling empire, I found solace in small victories. Each step forward reinforced my belief that justice prevails when pursued with integrity and determination. Yet, I remained vigilant, aware that complacency could derail everything I'd worked so hard to achieve. Revenge doesn't come easy. It requires patience, resilience, and above all, focus. And though the road ahead promised challenges, I faced them head-on, knowing full well that tomorrow would bring new opportunities, and perhaps, finally, peace. Months passed, and the legal battle intensified. The courtroom became a battleground where every word, every document, and every witness carried weight far beyond their surface meaning. Jake, ever the opportunist, hired high-priced lawyers to defend himself, confident that his connections and resources would shield him from consequences. He strutted into court with an air of invincibility, flanked by attorneys who seemed more like bodyguards than legal representatives. His demeanor was calculated, calm, collected, almost smug, as if he believed the system would inevitably bend in his favor. But no amount of money could erase the mountain of proof stacked against him. During cross-examinations, witnesses revealed shocking details about his manipulative tactics, painting him as a master con artist rather than the devoted husband he pretended to be. Former colleagues testified about how Jake had exploited company policies for personal gain, siphoning funds through elaborate schemes involving shell companies and offshore accounts. One particularly damning revelation came from a former business partner who described how Jake had coerced her into signing documents she didn't fully understand, effectively stealing equity in a lucrative startup. Her testimony sent ripples through the courtroom, turning heads and raising eyebrows among even the most jaded observers. The evidence piled up relentlessly. Emails exchanged between Jake and Rachel during their affair surfaced, exposing not just their emotional betrayal, but also their financial collaboration. These communications detailed plans to launder money, purchase properties under false names, and hide assets from creditors. Each email was a dagger aimed directly at their credibility, undermining any attempt they made to portray themselves as innocent victims of circumstance. As the prosecution presented these findings, Jake's facade began to crack. His carefully constructed image of a hardworking family man crumbled under scrutiny, leaving behind a portrait of greed, deceit, and ruthlessness. Rachel, sensing the tide turning against them, tried desperately to distance herself from the scandal. She claimed ignorance of Jake's schemes, insisting that she was merely a pawn caught up in his machinations. "I trusted him," she declared during one particularly heated deposition, her voice trembling with emotion. "How was I supposed to know what he was doing behind my back?" Her performance might have swayed some less skeptical audiences, but it failed miserably in the face of overwhelming evidence. Emails uncovered during investigations exposed her active involvement in laundering funds, revealing conversations where she discussed strategies for concealing assets and avoiding detection. One exchange stood out, a casual discussion about purchasing a luxury villa in the Caribbean, complete with detailed instructions on how to transfer money discreetly. It left little room for doubt. Rachel wasn't just complicit. She was a willing participant in their crimes. Her desperate attempts to salvage her reputation fell flat as damning evidence continued surfacing. Friends who once fawned over her success now distanced themselves, wary of being associated with someone embroiled in such controversy. Colleagues turned cold, cutting ties both professional and personal. Even acquaintances from our shared past chimed in, sharing stories of odd behavior or questionable decisions that suddenly made sense in light of recent revelations. The isolation grew palpable, suffocating her attempts to rebuild a semblance of normalcy. Without allies to support her, Rachel found herself trapped in a web of her own making, unable to escape the consequences of her actions. Amidst the chaos, I remained composed, watching their lives unravel piece by piece. Each victory brought me closer to closure, yet I still craved one final act of retribution. For that, I needed to strike when they least expected it. Revenge doesn't come easy. It requires patience, precision, and timing. And though I'd already achieved significant victories, I knew there was more to be done. Their downfall couldn't end here. It had to culminate in something definitive, something that left no doubt about the magnitude of their betrayal. During this period, I spent countless hours strategizing with Emma and Mark, refining our approach to ensure maximum impact. We explored every possible angle, leaving no stone unturned in our pursuit of justice. One idea emerged as particularly promising, leveraging public opinion to amplify the pressure on Jake and Rachel. Social media had already played a critical role in exposing their misdeeds, but we realized its potential went far beyond mere outrage. By framing their case as a cautionary tale about corporate corruption and ethical failure, we could tap into broader societal concerns about accountability and transparency. This shift in narrative transformed the story from a personal vendetta into a rallying cry for change. To execute this plan, I collaborated with influencers and activists who shared similar values. Together, we organized campaigns highlighting issues related to workplace ethics, financial regulation, and gender equality. Articles appeared in major publications dissecting the implications of Jake and Rachel's actions, while online petitions garnered thousands of signatures demanding stricter oversight of corporate practices. Suddenly, their case transcended individual guilt, becoming emblematic of systemic flaws that affected countless others. Watching the movement grow gave me a sense of purpose far greater than simple revenge. It fueled a desire to create lasting change. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings marched forward, each step bringing us closer to resolution. Judges issued rulings unfavorable to Jake, ordering him to surrender control of disputed assets and submit to independent audits of his finances. Investigators unearthed additional layers of deception, uncovering hidden accounts and undisclosed partnerships that further tarnished his reputation. Even Rachel faced mounting challenges as regulators scrutinized her involvement in various ventures tied to Jake's operations. The once unshakable couple now teetered on the brink of ruin, their carefully constructed empire crumbling beneath the weight of their own hubris. Despite the progress, I remained cautious, aware that complacency could undo everything we'd worked so hard to achieve. Revenge demands vigilance, not just in execution, but in follow-through. So, I redoubled my efforts, staying engaged in every aspect of the case while preparing for contingencies. If Jake attempted to flee, we had extradition agreements ready to bring him back. If Rachel sought refuge in denial, we possessed irrefutable evidence to shatter her defenses. Every possibility was accounted for, every loophole sealed shut. As the days stretched into weeks, and the weeks into months, the cracks in their facade widened irreparably. Public opinion shifted decisively against them, fueled by revelations that stripped away any pretense of innocence. Allies abandoned them en masse, recognizing too late that loyalty to criminals only invites shame. Meanwhile, I watched from the sidelines, satisfied but not content. Satisfaction comes easily. True closure requires action. And though the legal process provided vindication, I longed for something more, a moment of reckoning, a chance to confront them directly and make them feel the full weight of their betrayal. That opportunity would come soon enough. For now, I bided my time, gathering strength and resolve for the final act. Revenge doesn't come easy, but neither does redemption. Both require sacrifice, commitment, and unwavering focus. And as I prepared for the next phase of my journey, I reminded myself of a simple truth. Tomorrow holds infinite possibilities. Tomorrow, I thought, will bring new opportunities and perhaps finally peace. Just when I believed I held all the cards, a surprising twist emerged. The legal proceedings had reached a critical juncture, with both Jake and Rachel facing mounting evidence of their wrongdoing. Their carefully constructed empire was crumbling under the weight of scrutiny, leaving them vulnerable and desperate. Yet, as I prepared for the final stages of my plan, an unexpected revelation shook the foundation of my strategy. During a routine investigation, authorities discovered a secondary beneficiary listed in Jake's will. Yes, me. Despite everything, the betrayal, the deceit, the years of manipulation, he had kept me named as his primary heir in case of his death. At first, I dismissed it as mere oversight. After all, why would someone who had stolen so much from me still include me in his plans? But the more I thought about it, the more unsettling the discovery became. What if this wasn't an accident? What if Jake, in his twisted way, had left me a parting gift, a cruel irony designed to haunt him even after his downfall? The implications were staggering. If Jake were convicted and sentenced to prison, his assets, what remained of them, at least, would automatically transfer to me. This meant that not only would he lose everything he worked so hard to steal, but Rachel would be cut out entirely. She'd spent months building her new life around the wealth they had amassed together, only to find herself stripped of it by a provision she likely never knew existed. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, not because I pitied her, but because it highlighted just how unpredictable revenge can be. Sometimes, fate has its own way of exacting justice. This revelation changed my perspective drastically. For weeks, I had been consumed by thoughts of public humiliation, of exposing every lie and forcing them to face the consequences of their actions. It felt satisfying to imagine them standing trial, their reputations in tatters, their lives reduced to shadows of what they once were. But now, staring at the document detailing Jake's will, I began to question whether such efforts were truly necessary. Perhaps letting fate take its course would prove far crueler than anything I could orchestrate myself. After all, there's something poetic about watching someone lose everything they fought so hard to gain, only to realize too late that their greatest mistake was written into their own plans. After consulting with Emma, I agreed to monitor developments closely before making a decision. Her advice was practical, yet measured. Don't rush, she cautioned. Let the system do its job. If Jake's will holds up in court, you'll have leverage without lifting a finger. And if it doesn't, we'll adjust accordingly. Her words resonated deeply, reminding me that patience is often the most powerful weapon in any battle. Revenge isn't about immediate gratification. It's about timing, precision, and execution. With this in mind, I resolved to wait and watch as events unfolded around me. In the meantime, tensions escalated between Jake and Rachel. The facade of unity they had maintained for so long finally shattered under the pressure of their impending trials. Blame games erupted frequently, each accusation more venomous than the last. During one particularly heated exchange captured on surveillance footage outside the courthouse, Rachel accused Jake of dragging her into his schemes against her will. "You used me," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know half of what you were doing until it was too late." Jake, ever the manipulator, countered with icy calm. "Don't play the victim now," he retorted, his voice dripping with disdain. "You signed those documents willingly. You took that money knowing where it came from. Don't try to act like some innocent bystander. It won't work." Their public spat drew widespread attention, further tarnishing their already fragile reputations. Media outlets seized the opportunity to dissect their relationship, speculating about power dynamics, hidden agendas, and ulterior motives. Friends and acquaintances weighed in online, offering opinions that ranged from sympathy to outright condemnation. Some defended Rachel, portraying her as a naive accomplice manipulated by a calculating partner. Others painted her as equally culpable, dismissing her claims of ignorance as convenient lies. Regardless of perspective, one thing was clear. Their bond had fractured beyond repair. Watching them turn on each other provided grim amusement, reinforcing my belief that karma works in mysterious ways. Once inseparable, Jake and Rachel now seemed incapable of coexisting without conflict. Every interaction between them carried undertones of resentment, every word laced with bitterness. Even their lawyers struggled to mediate disputes, often stepping in to prevent arguments from spiraling out of control. To outsiders, their deterioration might have appeared tragic, a cautionary tale about love gone wrong. To me, however, it was validation, a confirmation that their sins had caught up with them, no matter how cleverly disguised. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself reflecting on the nature of revenge itself. Was it enough to see them suffer? Or did true closure require something more? A personal confrontation, perhaps, or a moment of reckoning where they acknowledged their wrongdoing face to face. These questions haunted me during quiet moments, surfacing unexpectedly when least expected. One evening, while reviewing documents related to the case, I stumbled upon a passage from a book I'd read years ago. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but forgiveness is a meal that nourishes the soul. The sentiment struck a chord within me, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths about my motivations. Had I pursued this path solely for vengeance, or was there something deeper driving me? Did I truly seek justice, or merely satisfaction? These introspective musings unsettled me, challenging assumptions I had taken for granted. While part of me reveled in the prospect of seeing Jake and Rachel pay for their crimes, another part yearned for peace, a release from the cycle of anger and resentment that had defined my life since discovering their betrayal. Could forgiveness offer that freedom? Or would it render my efforts meaningless, undermining the very principles I fought so hard to uphold? These internal struggles played out against the backdrop of ongoing legal battles. Investigators continued uncovering layers of deception, revealing connections between Jake's corporate ventures and shadowy figures operating in the underworld of finance. Each revelation chipped away at his credibility, painting him not just as a con artist, but as a dangerous player capable of destroying lives for personal gain. Meanwhile, Rachel faced increasing scrutiny over her role in laundering funds, with regulators demanding answers about specific transactions tied directly to her name. Together, they formed a portrait of two individuals undone by hubris and greed, a cautionary tale, if ever there was one. Yet, despite the progress made thus far, I knew the journey wasn't over. Tomorrow held infinite possibilities, shaped by choices made today. And though uncertainty lingered, one thing remained certain. Revenge doesn't come easy. It requires sacrifice, resilience, and above all, clarity of purpose. As I prepared for the next phase of my plan, I reminded myself of a simple truth. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities, and perhaps, finally, peace. Paradoxically, as the dust settled around their crumbling empire, I found myself questioning whether revenge truly satisfied me. Sure, witnessing their downfall delivered temporary gratification, a fleeting sense of justice served. But beneath that surface satisfaction, a deeper unease lingered. Lingering bitterness gnawed at my soul, poisoning the very peace I had sought to achieve. The victory felt hollow, like a prize won at too great a cost. Every step forward seemed to drag me further into a cycle of anger and resentment, one that threatened to consume not just them, but me as well. One sleepless night, unable to shake these thoughts, I confided in Emma about my internal struggle. She listened intently, her expression softening as she absorbed my words. When I finished speaking, there was a long pause before she responded. "You know," she said finally, her voice gentle yet firm, "revenge is powerful, but it's also exhausting. Holding on to resentment harms only yourself. Have you ever considered forgiveness as a path toward healing?" Her suggestion caught me off guard. Forgiveness? After everything they had done, betraying my trust, stealing my life, destroying my happiness, how could forgiveness possibly be an option? Yet, as much as I wanted to dismiss her words outright, something about her perspective resonated with me. Could letting go of anger actually bring closure? Or would it render my efforts meaningless, undermining the principles I fought so hard to uphold? Though hesitant, entertained the idea, reflecting on past memories shared with Jake and Rachel. Despite their betrayal, they once meant something significant to me. Jake had been my partner, my confidant, the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Rachel had been my best friend since college, someone I trusted implicitly, someone who knew all my secrets and still loved me anyway. How could I simply erase those years, reducing them to nothing more than a backdrop for their deceit? Even now, buried beneath layers of pain and anger, fragments of fondness remained. Faint echoes of laughter, shared dreams, and moments of genuine connection. Could I find peace by letting go of anger instead of clinging to vengeance? The question haunted me for days, surfacing unexpectedly during quiet moments when least expected. Inspired by this notion, I decided to take a bold step. Drafting a heartfelt letter addressing both Jake and Rachel, I poured out my emotions honestly, laying bare the hurt, confusion, and betrayal I had endured. But rather than ending the message with accusations or demands, I extended olive branches of reconciliation. My tone wasn't forgiving. Not yet, but it was open, inviting dialogue where none had existed before. "Maybe we can't undo what's been done," I wrote, "but maybe we can understand why it happened. Maybe we can start rebuilding, not necessarily as friends or partners, but as human beings capable of learning from our mistakes." Submitting the letter proved challenging, knowing full well it might ignite renewed hostility. After all, neither Jake nor Rachel had shown much inclination toward introspection throughout the ordeal. Still, I mailed it anonymously, trusting destiny to guide outcomes. If nothing else, writing the letter provided catharsis, allowing me to articulate feelings I hadn't dared voice aloud. Whether they chose to respond, or even read it, was beyond my control. All I could do was plant the seed and wait. Days later, responses arrived unexpectedly, from neither party individually, but jointly. Their replies stunned me, arriving in the form of a carefully typed email addressed simply to Sarah. At first glance, it appeared formal, almost rehearsed, but as I read further, its sincerity became undeniable. They began by acknowledging the depth of my pain, admitting openly how their actions had caused irreparable harm. "We don't expect forgiveness," they wrote, their words trembling with vulnerability. "We don't deserve it, but we owe you the truth, the whole truth, and perhaps, if you're willing, an opportunity to make amends. Not for us, but for you. Because we see now that holding on to hatred hurts everyone involved. The admission shocked me, revealing vulnerabilities hidden beneath layers of bravado. For so long, Jake and Rachel had projected confidence, certainty, and superiority. Now, stripped of their defenses, they sounded fragile, broken, and achingly human. Had their trials humbled them enough to confront their own flaws? Or was this merely another act, another attempt to manipulate events in their favor? Doubt crept in, clouding my judgment and forcing me to reconsider every word. As I reread their response multiple times, searching for signs of insincerity, I realized something profound. Regardless of intent, their acknowledgement carried weight. By owning their mistakes, even belatedly, they opened a door previously closed. A door leading not to absolution, but to understanding. And while I wasn't ready to forgive, I recognized the value of exploring this newfound possibility. Over the following weeks, I engaged cautiously in conversations with them, mediated through Emma to ensure boundaries remained intact. These exchanges weren't easy. Old wounds flared up repeatedly, threatening to derail progress entirely. Yet slowly but surely, patterns emerged. Both Jake and Rachel admitted regret for their actions, acknowledging the devastation caused by their selfish decisions. More shockingly, they proposed collaborating with me to rebuild what remained of their shattered lives. Initially skeptical, I listened intently as they outlined plans to repay debts, restore credibility, and seek professional counseling. Their proposal struck me as audacious at first glance. Why should I help people who had betrayed me so thoroughly? But then I remembered Emma's earlier advice. Holding on to resentment harms only oneself. Perhaps collaboration offered a chance to channel negative energy into constructive action, to transform anger into purpose. So, reluctantly, I agreed to meet them halfway, establishing strict boundaries and conditions for cooperation. Under supervision from Emma and Mark, we initiated steps toward restitution, including liquidating remaining assets to compensate victims affected by Jake's fraud. Throughout this process, unexpected bonds formed between us, blurring lines drawn earlier. Conversations evolved beyond apologies, delving into introspective discussions about choices and consequences. Gradually, mutual respect replaced animosity, fostering an unlikely alliance rooted in shared struggles. Though progress moved slowly, visible improvements restored fragments of hope. Yet, despite these developments, doubts persisted. Could true redemption ever be possible after such profound betrayal? Or were we merely dancing around the edges of reality, pretending to mend what couldn't be fixed? These questions weighed heavily on me, prompting late-night reflections and countless conversations with Emma. Her wisdom proved invaluable during this period, reminding me that healing isn't linear. It twists and turns unpredictably, often requiring leaps of faith. In time, I came to accept that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It acknowledges it. It doesn't excuse wrongdoing. It seeks understanding. And most importantly, it liberates not just the forgiver, but the forgiven as well. As I navigated this complex terrain, I discovered strength in vulnerability, courage in uncertainty, and hope in possibilities yet unseen. Tomorrow held infinite opportunities and perhaps finally peace. To my astonishment, Jake and Rachel admitted regret for their actions, acknowledging the devastation caused by their selfish decisions. Their confession came not as a desperate plea for forgiveness, but as an honest admission of guilt, stripped bare of the bravado and defensiveness that had characterized their earlier interactions. More shockingly, they proposed collaborating with me to rebuild what remained of their shattered lives. Initially skeptical, I listened intently as they outlined plans to repay debts, restore credibility, and seek professional counseling. Each word carried weight, each promise tempered by uncertainty. Could they truly change? Or was this merely another attempt to manipulate events in their favor? Their sincerity seemed genuine, though doubt lingered like a shadow cast over our tentative truce. After all, how does one trust people who have betrayed so deeply? Yet, there was something compelling about their vulnerability, something raw and unfiltered that resonated on a level deeper than logic or reason. They spoke not just of restitution, but of transformation, of learning from their mistakes and building a future rooted in accountability rather than deceit. It was a vision that, while daunting, held undeniable appeal. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet them halfway, establishing strict boundaries and conditions for cooperation. Under supervision from Emma and Mark, we initiated steps toward restitution, beginning with liquidating remaining assets to compensate victims affected by Jake's fraud. This process proved more complex than anticipated, requiring meticulous documentation, legal maneuvering, and painstaking negotiation. Every decision demanded careful consideration, balancing justice with practicality. But even amidst these challenges, progress emerged. A slow, steady march forward that restored fragments of hope. For instance, when Jake transferred ownership of a property purchased under false pretenses back to its rightful owner, the gratitude expressed in return was palpable. A single mother who had nearly lost her home due to his schemes hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. The moment caught us all off guard, forcing Jake to confront the real-world impact of his actions. From then on, he approached subsequent transactions with renewed determination, driven less by obligation and more by a desire to make amends. Similarly, Rachel took active steps to repair relationships damaged by her involvement in laundering funds. She reached out to former colleagues, apologizing openly for any harm caused and offering assistance where possible. One coworker, initially hesitant to engage, eventually accepted her apology after witnessing consistent effort over several months. These small victories accumulated, creating momentum that fueled further progress. Though far from perfect, the changes were undeniable and surprisingly impactful. Throughout this process, unexpected bonds formed between us, blurring lines drawn earlier. Conversations evolved beyond apologies, delving into introspective discussions about choices and consequences. We spent hours dissecting the events leading up to their betrayal, analyzing patterns of behavior and identifying triggers that contributed to their downfall. At times, these sessions felt therapeutic, providing clarity where confusion once reigned. Other times, they were painful, forcing us to relive moments best left buried. Yet, through it all, mutual respect replaced animosity, fostering an unlikely alliance rooted in shared struggles. One particularly memorable exchange occurred during a meeting at Emma's office. As we reviewed financial records tied to Jake's offshore accounts, he paused suddenly, staring at a document detailing a transaction made shortly before our marriage. "I remember this," he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. When I started those ventures, I thought I was doing it for us, for our future. Somewhere along the way, though, it became about me, about power, control, and look where it got me." His honesty caught me off guard, prompting a response I hadn't expected. "You didn't just hurt yourself, Jake," I replied, my tone measured yet firm. "You hurt everyone around you. Rachel, your family, me. We trusted you. And you threw that away for greed." "I know," he admitted, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his words. "And I can't undo it. But maybe if we work together, we can start rebuilding some of what was lost. Not just for you, but for ourselves too." The conversation continued long after the meeting ended, spilling into personal reflections about love, loyalty, and redemption. By the time we parted ways, both of us carried a sense of understanding neither could have predicted weeks earlier. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was progress. As months turned into seasons, the dynamics among us shifted dramatically. What began as a reluctant partnership transformed into something resembling camaraderie, albeit tinged with lingering wariness. Together, we tackled challenges ranging from legal disputes to public relations crises, leveraging individual strengths to achieve common goals. Jake's business acumen proved invaluable in restructuring finances, while Rachel's interpersonal skills helped mend broken ties within their social circles. My own experience navigating the complexities of betrayal lent perspective, ensuring decisions aligned with principles of fairness and integrity. Still, moments of tension arose frequently, testing the limits of our fragile alliance. During one heated argument over allocation of resources, old wounds resurfaced, threatening to derail progress entirely. "Why should I trust you?" I snapped, frustration boiling over. "Everything you've done so far could just be another act." Jake met my gaze steadily, his expression devoid of defensiveness. "Because if it were an act, don't you think I'd have walked away by now?" He countered softly. "This isn't easy for me either, Sarah. But I'm here because I believe it's the right thing to do. Not for you, not for Rachel, but for myself." His words struck a chord, reminding me that healing isn't linear. It twists and turns unpredictably, often requiring leaps of faith. In that moment, I chose to take one, trusting not in their promises, but in the incremental progress we'd already achieved. By year's end, significant strides had been made. Debts were repaid, reputations partially restored, and lessons learned that would shape futures differently. Those scars remained. They no longer defined us. Instead, they served as reminders of resilience, proof that even the most fractured relationships can evolve into something new. Tomorrow held infinite possibilities, and perhaps, finally, peace. Reflecting on events leading up to this point, I marveled at how dramatically circumstances shifted. The journey from harboring vengeful thoughts to embracing forgiveness was neither straightforward nor easy. It was a labyrinth of emotions, challenges, and unexpected revelations. Yet, it taught invaluable lessons about resilience, redemption, and the complexities of human nature. Through every twist and turn, I learned that life rarely follows predictable paths. Instead, its unpredictability enriches experiences in ways both painful and profound. When I first discovered Jake and Rachel's betrayal, my world shattered into pieces too small to glue back together. Anger consumed me, fueling a desire for revenge that felt almost primal. At the time, it seemed like the only way to reclaim some semblance of control over a life spiraling out of my grasp. But as months passed and the dust settled around their crumbling empire, I began to realize something crucial. Holding on to resentment harms only oneself. It keeps wounds open, festering with bitterness, preventing true healing from taking root. This realization didn't come overnight. It required countless sleepless nights, introspective conversations with Emma, and moments of vulnerability where I allowed myself to feel not just anger, but sadness, confusion, and even hope. Slowly but surely, I started seeing forgiveness not as an act of weakness, but as one of strength. To forgive is to acknowledge pain without letting it define you. It's to recognize mistakes without excusing them, to seek understanding without condoning wrongdoing. Most importantly, it's to release the chains binding you to the past so you can step forward into a brighter future. Today, I stand stronger, wiser, and free from those chains. While scars remain, reminders of what once was, they no longer dictate my choices or cloud my vision. Instead, they serve as markers of resilience, proof that I survived something unimaginable and emerged better for it. Jake and Rachel, too, continue striving to mend broken relationships, albeit imperfectly. Their efforts are far from perfect, marked by missteps and setbacks, but they demonstrate growth, a willingness to confront their flaws and work toward change. Our ongoing collaboration serves as testament to the human capacity for transformation, showing that even the most fractured connections can evolve into something new. Our alliance, born out of necessity and nurtured through shared struggles, has become a symbol of possibility. Together, we've repaid debts, restored credibility, and sought professional counseling, all steps toward rebuilding lives shattered by greed and deceit. Though progress moves slowly, visible improvements bring fragments of hope, reinforcing the belief that redemption is never beyond reach. These victories, however small, remind me that healing isn't linear. It twists and turns unpredictably, often requiring patience and persistence. But when achieved, it offers clarity regarding priorities and values, guiding decisions with purpose and intention. Life, as I've come to understand, thrives on its unpredictability. Every challenge presents an opportunity for growth, every failure a chance to learn, and every triumph a reason to celebrate. Navigating these twists and turns enriches experiences immeasurably, shaping individuals into versions of themselves they might never have imagined. For me, this journey wasn't just about surviving betrayal. It was about thriving despite it, about discovering strength in vulnerability, courage in uncertainty, and hope in possibilities yet unseen. Tomorrow holds infinite possibilities, shaped by choices made today. And for the first time in years, I greet the future with optimism, eager to embrace whatever adventures await. Whether joyous or challenging, each moment carries potential for growth, each interaction an opportunity for connection. As I look ahead, I carry with me not just memories of the past, but lessons learned along the way, lessons about love, loyalty, and the power of forgiveness. With these insights guiding my path, I walk forward confidently, knowing full well that tomorrow will bring new beginnings, new challenges, and perhaps, finally, peace.